So, Commissioner, it is our pleasure to have you here today. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join our chapter. We have participation here from the Triad region in the western part of the state. We have folks from all over the ASSP Society. We've got some of our DT counterparts here today as well. So we're just so thankful for this opportunity. So we just want to turn it over to you now, sir, to give your address, and we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin, so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, everything's fine. Perfect.
Okay, great. It is an honor to be with North Carolina ASSP today. Glad the timing worked out. And what I'd like to do is just give you a brief background of myself, some things that we're dealing with at the department, maybe talk briefly about the budget, and then maybe save some time for some questions, if that's okay. More in a conversational style as opposed to some speech style. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. I do come, as Robin said, from the western part of the state. I represented McDowell County in the state as county commissioner for 2 years, and then was fortunate enough in 2013 to be appointed to the state house representing Avery, Mitchell, and McDowell counties. Worked mostly on healthcare issues and served as an appropriations chair. Didn't deal too much in finance, but stuck mostly with the appropriations budget part of the General Assembly, and did that for 4 terms and really enjoyed my time there. I knew that I only wanted to do 4 terms, and I always just try to be honest on the level with any group that I'm talking to. I knew I wanted to do 4 terms in the state house. I'd never wanted to be Speaker of the House, and I never wanted to be Majority Leader. I wanted to help write the budget, and I wanted to chair the Health Policy Committee. So I was very blessed to get to do that. So the only 2 things outside of the state house and elected office that ever had any appeal to me, in all candor, was Congress from Western North Carolina or Commissioner of Labor. And with a daughter who will be 17 in January, and the thought of being one of 435 and going to DC every week had kind of lost its appeal to me. I no longer wanted to do that. So the only thing left in elected office to me that had an appeal was Commissioner of Labor. I didn't know Commissioner Berry that well at the time, so I just assumed she was going to run again. And I was prepared to go home, to be honest with you. And news got out that March or April, I believe it was, of 2019, that she was not going to run for office again. So I knew that I was not going to run for the state house again. And the only thing that had an appeal to me was Commissioner of Labor. If it would have been insurance or Secretary of State, I wouldn't have run for it. I wanted it, if I was going to subject myself for 2 years of my life to statewide campaigning, I wanted it to matter. And I'm biased, but I believe that the Department of Labor is, if not the most, one of the most consequential council of state positions. And I wanted to run for that position for 2 reasons. One, the broad nature of the position. It's not the same thing every day, which covers wage and hour, boiler inspections. It covers employment discrimination, and that's separate from the workforce safety. That's separate from the OSH side of what we do. So I knew it was going to be broad, and I knew it was going to be something different every day. And besides that, the consequential nature of the work that we do. I don't need to tell anybody on this call how important the Department of Labor is, and how important what you all do when it comes to keeping your employees safe on a daily basis. So for those 2 reasons, I didn't have to put a lot of thought into it, because I knew I wasn't going to run for the state house again, and the Department of Labor was the only position that I wanted to run for elected office. So in politics, timing and luck is everything. So I was very blessed to get to do that. I'm going to sound a little bit like a politician, so I ask for your indulgence on the front end, but I think it's an important point that I want to try to make. And then I'll talk specific about the year that we've had and the year ahead. You know, in North Carolina, there's so much that makes us special. There's so much that makes us unique, from our military from our agriculture, from our healthcare, from public education. I come from public education. Had it not been for traditional public education in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, there's no way that I would be here before you today as the North Carolina Commissioner of Labor. So there's so much that we have that makes us unique. Our geography, from the mountains where I come from to the coast, to our RTP, to Mecklenburg, to Charlotte, all that makes us unique, makes us one of the most unique states, and all that we have that makes us great. But you know, one thing that gets overlooked is what you all do every day. You can't have a growing, thriving economy and state and society without assurances that the workforce and the workplace is going to be safe. And what you all do on a daily basis is no less significant or no less consequential than what what agriculture does for our state, what education does for our state, what healthcare does for our state, what the tax rate does for our state, what the regulatory environment does. You all are in that same category. And it's cliche talking to this group today about that, but that's just a fact. That's just the way that it is. So I want to say thank you for what you all do to make North Carolina unique and special, and the way you all contribute to what makes us that way, no less than any of the other things that makes us significant. So I wanted to say thank you. Diving into the specifics of what we're dealing with here in North Carolina, I just want to hit the highlights, and then Robin, if it's okay, save some time for questions. One, ETS 1. That came out earlier in the year, that the Biden administration wrote an emergency temporary standard dealing strictly with the healthcare industry. It did not include a vaccine mandate, but it did include some pretty rigorous standards for the healthcare industry. Temperature checks, separating those that were potentially exposed, and a lot of mandates that were in place. I didn't agree with all of them, but I wanted to get off on the right foot and show a good faith effort to work with the safety community and work with the Biden administration to do all that we could to make sure that employees in the healthcare industry particularly were safe. So I got to give a shout out to Wanda Legault and our ETTA group and our consultative bureau with Kevin Obar for the work that they did on the front end. We had a lot of the healthcare industry worried, long-term care, assisted living, hospitals, local doctor's office, that were worried about how this was going to affect them. But I wanted to be proactive on the front end. I wanted to make sure that we put out all the information we could so they would be ready to go when we had to implement what I call Emergency Temporary Standard 1, or ETS 1. And that's went relatively well from our compliance side. We've not had a lot of hiccups, and I think a lot of that is because of the working relationship that I wanted to have on the front end so that everybody knew the lay of the land. So ETS 1 is going well. Our compliance officers are doing a great job, and the healthcare industry is doing a great job working with us to make sure that employees in that sector are safe on a daily basis. I couldn't let this time go by without talking about ETS 2. And again, I just want to be on the level with you and tell you where I stand and where we are right now. And ETS 2 obviously deals with vaccine mandates. I know you all on this call are very, very familiar with that at this point in time. It's been it's dominated the news cycle for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I want to preface by saying that I've been vaccinated. I've encouraged all of our employees at the North Carolina Department of Labor to be vaccinated. I don't want to be adversarial, and I've tried to show a good faith effort to work with the Biden administration and the U.S. Department of Labor on a range of issues. They've asked us to increase our penalties. So I've let them know that we are going to try to work with the General Assembly to try to figure out a path forward on that, to make sure that we preserve our state plan status. In addition to that, I readily adopted ETS 1 to try to show a good faith effort as well. So I tell you that to say I've been vaccinated. I'm not anti-vax, and I want to try to work in a collaborative way. But I do oppose ETS 2. I do oppose the vaccine mandate for numerous reasons, but I'm just going to give you 3. One, again, I don't need to tell anybody on this call how I believe we are at a state of emergency when it comes to workforce shortages and the need for workers in North Carolina. And this is only going to exacerbate that. This is only going to make that worse because I do believe that a large number of employees are just going to say, I'm going to go home and well, I'll figure something else out or I'll go somewhere else. But I think it's going to only make the workforce shortage in North Carolina worse. And I don't believe we have that luxury. We at the North Carolina Department of Labor, as you all know, don't deal with uh, uh, economic development and workforce issues, but I hear a lot about it, and I know what a crisis that is. So that's one reason. Second, in that 490-page regulatory document, there's not one additional dollar for the North Carolina Department of Labor to implement ETS2. Our roughly 100, 110 compliance officers are on the job every day working with you all to try to keep employees safe. And we simply at the North Carolina Department of Labor don't have the resources to try to implement or administer ETS2, even if we wanted to. And third, I think it's fundamentally unfair. I use an anecdote of relatives that I have in Western North Carolina who work at a large manufacturing facility, and they've worked there for over 15 years. And they've said, Josh, if I have to choose between keeping the job that I love or getting a vaccine that I'm opposed to for whatever reason, I'm just going to have to go home and figure something else out. And to me, that's fundamentally unfair. I don't think that's the right approach. I believe there's other things that we could do. And I was ready to work with the Biden administration on other things we could do, not just in the healthcare industry, and work with frankly the advocate and the union community to try to figure out a path forward. They chose not to go in that direction. And I think it's fundamentally unfair to force employees to choose on that. Where we are, the Fifth Circuit put a very strong ruling on this and said, halt this, do not move forward, Biden administration, USDOL, with this vaccine mandate. How I'm not going to get into the nuances of how the federal courts work, but in the end, the Sixth Circuit is the court that will ultimately decide this case. They have indicated that they will rule on December 10th or after on whether the vaccine mandate is constitutional or not. Right now, it's kind of in a hold mode. I'm telling businesses, employers across this state that the North Carolina Department of Labor will take no action until this thing is decided in the courts. And then I will decide what my response will be to USDOL. But right now, we at the Department of Labor are going to take no action until this thing is decided at the Sixth Circuit. It could be appealed to the Supreme Court, which I anticipate that it would be, but I don't know that the Supreme Court would take this case. If they do, ultimately, that's who would decide the case. But if they choose not to take the case, then the Sixth Circuit Court would be the decider on whether this is constitutional or not. You say, Josh, what are you going to do if it's ruled constitutional? I'm convinced that it will be ruled unconstitutional, and then we can work with all stakeholders to figure out how we get through this I believe, the last throes of this virus. But if it is not ruled constitutional, someone had told me that, Josh, if you win, you will have to choose sometimes between bad and worse. And this is one of those cases where I would have to choose between bad and worse. I would either have to adopt something that I'm fundamentally opposed to on every single level, or I would not adopt this and risk losing North Carolina's state plan status. Neither of those are good for North Carolina. And so the short answer is I would make that decision at that time. But right now, I don't know what I would do. I would let this thing play out, and then we would move forward at that time. But that's the decision that I would be faced with if it is ruled constitutional. So I wanted to give you an update on ETS2, where we're at, what I'm telling employers at this time. And right now we're just kind of in a holding pattern, and we're waiting for the Sixth Circuit to rule, hopefully on December 10th or shortly thereafter. So in the next week or two, we should know, is my expectation. Moving on, I do, Commissioner Berry and others really push for our ETTA and our consultative services. And I want to continue to do that, as I know most of you all do. I believe that the best way to keep employees safe is to be proactive on the front end to prevent accidents from happening on the back end. It doesn't do any good after an accident's happened. We can penalize and we can drop the hammer, and we'll do what we need to do in those cases, but that doesn't undo an injury, and that doesn't undo a fatality. So I believe that the best way to keep employees safe is working with our consultative services and really pushing that, and pushing our education, training, and technical assistance. And that's the approach that I want to take, as opposed to being punitive and adversarial on the back end. I just don't think that's the right way to govern, and I don't think that's the right approach to keeping employees safe. So that's where I'm going to need your all's help. I really want, over the next 3 years, my goal is to increase the number of Carolina Star sites and the number of Sharp sites. I believe that that's the best approach to keeping employees safe. So I really want to work with you all. Please reach out to us if you're interested, if you're a business or an employer of 250 or less. That's where our Sharp program comes in, or obviously I know you all are familiar with our Carolina Star program. But that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to push. So I ask for your help on that. A couple other things I want to mention: the heat stress standard that you probably heard a lot about the last couple of weeks. The feds are working on that. I don't anticipate that North Carolina will adopt something separate from what is already on the books, and we do some things with general duty, but we don't have a heat stress standard in North Carolina as of now. And I don't anticipate we'll do something different from where we are right now. If the feds in time do adopt a heat stress standard, we would most likely adopt that. I'd want to see it first, but we would most likely adopt that. But that may be, I don't know, these things, as you all know, take time, years sometimes. So we're just kind of waiting right now as that goes forward. Really pleased with the budget here in North Carolina. We were able to get a 5% state employee raises, which would include our compliance officers. We are really struggling right now to hire qualified compliance officers. But I think money, there's no other way around it. We've got to increase salaries at the North Carolina Department of Labor to keep the best and brightest, to work with you all on a daily basis. That's both in consultative compliance and in ETTA. So really, really pleased with the budget. We were able to get 2 new ASH positions, agricultural safety and health, to help facilitate and expedite inspections for migrant camps, particularly in the eastern part of our state. So very pleased with the budget. Kudos to Governor Cooper and the General Assembly for working together to sign a budget and get a budget passed that moves North Carolina forward in a positive way. Last thing I want to say is I want to bring a new approach to governing. I want to bring a new approach to how we approach governing in North Carolina, where it's not so politically divisive and so cutthroat. That's not my demeanor. That's not my approach. That's not the way I worked in the House or as county commissioner, and that's certainly not the way I'm going to work as commissioner of labor. So I want to do all I can to work in a bipartisan or nonpartisan way. And I think the best way that I've shown that is I want to work with all stakeholders. Yes, I may spend a day talking to the North Carolina Chamber or NFIB or other business interests, but I pick up the phone on a regular basis and talk to AFL-CIO and other groups, because I want to hear from all stakeholders, because I believe that having all these stakeholders at the table is the best way to keep employees safe, and I think it's the best way to govern. And that's the approach that I took in the House, and that's the approach I'm going to take as Commissioner of Labor. So that's a lot in a short period of time. I know you guys got a lot going on today. I just wanted to introduce myself, and I look forward to working with you over the next 3 years and hopefully the next 4 years after that. So Robin, it's an honor. Look forward to the relationship. Hopefully see you guys in person sooner rather than later. But with that, I'd be glad to take questions.
Commissioner Dobson, thank you so much for your insight. And I really appreciate the comments about the STAR sites and the sharp efforts for bolstering those programs. They mirror the VPP and some of the other federal programs that we're all excited about. So that's a great insight. And your position, your stance, your demeanor, certainly appreciate that as well, because there's been, well, with us, we talked about this morning with ASSP. Safety doesn't really have a party, doesn't have an affiliation.
Right.
Your blood's red, and when you get hurt at the end of the day, it's going to bleed red.
That's
It's
right.
not going to. It's not going. Well, we're not going to bleed this way today because of the party. So we had that conversation earlier. So I want to open it up to questions. We've got a lot of great people on this call today. Thank you all for taking your time. You can either pose those in chat, and we will moderate them and get you an answer here with the commissioner. Have a question, Justice? Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Eric Justice. Commissioner, I wanted to thank you. I participated in a webinar that you had with Phil Streck back about a month ago now. And I just want to thank you for your common sense approach, because what you said then is what you're saying today. Your common sense approach to the ETS. I think a lot of us appreciate the candor and the straightforwardness. My question is, there's a lot of people that, whether, in preparation of the ETS maybe going into effect, is there anything new perhaps you or the DOL can recommend to businesses to prepare? I know my employer, we're acquiring COVID tests and to be able to do it, on site and everything like that. Is there anything new or anything that you would recommend for companies?
There's not at this point. Two points I will make though is I think it's fine to read. It's a large document, as probably most on this call know. The 490 pages is very detailed and a lot in there that I'm still even now sorting through myself. One positive thing, I think, I've been asked about timelines a lot. Are these timelines going to stay in effect for January 4th or whatever that looks like? And the short answer is I don't believe that they will. I think the courts, even if they rule it constitutional, will have to take into consideration because the thing has been stayed, all the timelines are going to have to be moved up. So the things that you're talking about, the purchase of tests and all the other things that you are going to have to do to prepare, I think that you will have time to do that, because we do expect that the courts, even if they do rule that it's constitutional, I don't think that they will, but if they do, they will have to take that into consideration and push those timelines back to give you all time to do those types of things. So nothing new. I did just want to make those 2 points. It's okay to read the document, and I did want to mention that about timelines. That thank you for the question, because that triggered something that I had written down that I didn't say earlier. But outside of that, we really don't have any other recommendations at this point to get ready.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question is from Stephanie. And Stephanie says that public schools fall under OSHA where employees are concerned. But what about students, especially those enrolled in career and technical trade classes?
So as far as North Carolina Department of Labor is concerned, each community college may have their own set of standards, and there's other things out there that are forcing vaccinations as well. But that's outside of my purview, and I try to keep my comments tailored to employees. So as far as North Carolina Department of Labor goes, nothing that we would do now or in the future would affect students, even in the trades. That is not something that would fall under our purview. That's not to say that they would not be forced to receive a vaccination, to go to school, or to work with. There may be other variables out there that may be forced vaccination, but from our perspective, I wouldn't anticipate, even if it's ruled constitutional, something that we would regulate.
follow up, Stephanie adds, she's meaning K through 12. K through 12 schools.
Okay, I'm sorry. So with regard to K through 12, again, it would only be the employees. We would not have any regulatory oversight for students in K through 12. Now, the instructors in those trade areas that are employed by the school, even if part-time, they would fall under our purview, but students themselves would not fall under our purview, either K through 12 or the community college system.
Thank you, Commissioner. Steve has said, thank you so much for meeting with ASSP today. What would you say to vaccinated employees who say they will go home if forced to work with unvaccinated coworkers?
What would I say to vaccinated employees who are forced to work with unvaccinated employees? I would say, since the question was candid, I'll be candid in my response. I would say I believe the vaccine works. I believe that people should be vaccinated, and I believe that the vaccine would prevent, not in all cases, there are some who have been vaccinated who have still contracted COVID, but the data shows that it's less likely that if you're vaccinated that you would contract COVID. So I would feel comfortable since I have been vaccinated, and I would feel comfortable in a work site, even with those who have been unvaccinated, because I believe the vaccine works.
Very good. Thank you. Over to Martin Sinicki, Safety Director at DHHS. He has his hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say thanks for your leadership, but moreover towards your supervisors and compliance officers. I really truly believe they've done a great job with dealing with the pandemic. And especially in the beginning with all the PPE issues, the respiratory protection issues, and they've really given a lot of grace. And so thankful for them, and just appreciate that.
I appreciate that, Martin. I worked with HHS a lot in the General Assembly, and honored to continue that working relationship that was built before I got to labor between HHS and labor. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Martin. So we're back in the public schools again, it seems, Commissioner, and the question is very similar to the question that Stephanie asked. And it says, same question about teachers who do not want to work with students that are unmasked and unvaccinated. Maybe there's some sort of fear factor there.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that's been contemplated a lot, either by the feds or something that has that's a tough one when you're talking about students interacting with teachers. So yeah, I don't know that I have an answer for that one, Robin, other than to say I believe I would encourage everyone to get vaccinated. And I don't know that I can say anything more than that on students being vaccinated or not, because that's outside the purview of labor. I try to give straightforward answers, and I try not to hedge because that's what a lot of politicians do. I just don't have an answer on that one.
Well, and I agree with the FDA releasing more vaccines for children now, and with the approvals looking favorable. I would hope that there's always going to be this fence issue. There's always going to be the 80-20 rule. And no matter what we do, we're going to be faced with a certain subset of North Carolinians and Americans, for that matter, that have a different opinion. But I agree. I hope that we can move forward. and ease the vaccine fears. But I mean, just like our clinics we have over here at DOT, we've had a couple this week. We've got a certain percentage that if they haven't been vaccinated by now, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, they're probably not going to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
by now. So, and the fear is real. I mean, we had an employee earlier this week that had an issue with COVID, and now I just learned yesterday morning that they were moved to a ventilator.
Yeah.
And that is terrible because the percentages of coming off that are extremely low. And so, would I be fearful of a shot or would I be fearful of being on a ventilator? I mean, it's risk assessment 101, right?
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. I think your point is well taken. My daughter's been vaccinated, and I would hope that all students that are eligible will do that. But your point is well taken, and you're not going to get everybody.
Yeah, and Stephanie has come back with another comment here, and I think this will clear this up. Large clarification. So thank you for the discussion on this topic. It is so controversial. School boards are being crucified on this issue. So it's not really a labor issue. It's not so much a safety issue. It's more about perception, right?
Yeah, it is, and that's unfortunate. I regardless of however these school boards decide this, I really hate it for them. These were people who wanted to serve their community, serve the kids of their community, the students and children of their communities, and they've been kind of at ground zero of this debate. And that's not what they signed up for. They signed up to try to do what was right for their community, and they've been put in this politically divisive situation. And I hate it for them because that's not what they signed up for. It's unfortunate, to say the least.
Yeah, and in your time as public servant, and I've been a public servant for 14 years, and I can't recall a time in the past where we've had quite as much controversy on every level. I mean, can you relate to anything even close?
I've never seen the divisiveness on this issue and others the way that we have it now, unfortunately. But I do think that kind of corny, but labor gives us an opportunity to cut through some of that, because as you started your comments, we don't have the luxury of divisiveness and partisanship in what you all do and what we all do at labor. We got to keep people safe, so we can kind of set an example, and that's what I'm trying to do at labor, that we can be better than that, because in a lot of instances we don't have the so-called luxury of political division. So hopefully we can cut through that over the next 3 years.
Frida Sanders, one of our ASSP members from North Carolina, she just put in the chat, thank you for such a rational approach to this difficult, complex paradigm that we're in. Much appreciated.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I echo those remarks. And we're hearing that from Van and Steve again, and everyone's chiming in.
Great.
Now, you mentioned STAR programs, SHARP programs. If we could focus on fatalities in North Carolina, what do you think would be maybe one or two of the largest educational pushes we could have to make people more aware of the workplace and construction? We see it quite often. Just what do you think? I mean, just off the cuff.
Do you mean the best way to get the information out there?
Yes, I mean we obviously have we have some language barriers at times.
Yeah.
We've got some COVID barriers now. We've got all kinds of things. But what have you seen in your I mean, you're new, and I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Yeah. But I mean, what have you seen in the first 9 months, 10 months of labor?
Well, that's been the challenge, to get the word out. Our communication staff is really working hard, And there's no silver bullet for it. Those companies, I was just with a brewer actually in Asheville last week, earlier this week, I guess it was, and they just received their Sharp certification. And they just took the initiative and said, we want to figure out how we can do safety better. And they started researching us online. And this was before I even got there. I just got the tail end of it. And they started working with our consultative bureau, and they made a commitment to doing that. So that's one way that they just take the initiative. And in other ways, one Sharp site may talk to another Sharp site, and that's a way. But we are really, through our ledger, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, and by word of mouth, and by you all on this call as well. I don't think there's one certain way to do it. We are doing some billboards, I believe, as well, to try to get the word out. I think it's just got to be a shotgun approach to try to get that word out. I think we have, I know it's less than 200 Sharp sites, and there's far more eligible employers in North Carolina who would be eligible for Sharp in that. And we've just got to do a better job of getting the word out. But to answer your question, we are taking a shotgun approach to doing this. Every group I talk to, I try to mention it. We try to publicize it any way that we can, and try to go about it in that way, because that's the only way I know to get the word out. And you're still not going to touch everybody or get the word out to everybody, but we can hopefully narrow that gap.
Thank you. I agree. Josh, this is going to be a tough one here. Monty Simpson has really put it on the line. Monty wants to know, how do you feel when you step in an elevator in North Carolina and see your picture on the certificate of operation? How does that make you feel?
I was wondering if we would make it through this without an elevator question. So I appreciate the question. It's surreal for me to do that, but I tell you, my daughter keeps me humble and reminds me who I really am. So when we go into an elevator and she sees my picture, she just rolls her eyes and said, "Dad, whatever, just can you make sure my volleyball jersey or my basketball jersey's ready for my game tonight or tomorrow night?" So as much as I'd like to get think that I'm really something, my soon to be 17-year-old daughter reminds me who I really am. So it's surreal until my daughter rolls her eyes. How about that?
And thank God for our kids during this time, because they keep us all real. I mean, you can go to work and have all these issues, but you come home and you face reality, and that keeps us all well grounded.
Absolutely.
Wade Bailey wants to know, how exactly is the Department of Labor utilizing UAS technology with drones?
So we are doing some things with that. That's a pretty technical question. The short answer is I don't know the specifics of it. I know that Paul Sullivan down in Charlotte, our bureau chief, did a presentation back in the summer on that and showed me some things. But if you want to email me, I'd be glad to get you the specifics of that, because we are using that, but the technicalities of it, I don't know.
Sure.
But please do email me, and I can get Paul to get something to you guys, because that is the question is well taken, because that's something that's going to be more and more prevalent in the future. So be glad to get some information on that.
Yeah, and Wade's one of our he's one of our pilots here in our UAS program. So I'm sure he's just comparing just to see, but he's done a real good job with our program. Stephanie has got a good one too, and as a previous SSTM member myself, I can relate a little bit to this. She says that your consultative bureau has amazing people, but there are not a lot of them, and they really rely on volunteer team of trained SSTMs. What are your thoughts about beefing up this program and perhaps bringing in paid lateral entry general industry professionals to work in it? I think the key word there is paid. because I don't know in the budget if that's. I know when we did it for you guys, Doug Gaylord and I, it was not. I mean, we were volunteers. We were working with Kimberly and Lamar and all those folks. But any comments?
Yeah, that's tough. A big reason why that is the case is because that's not. I mean, we have some turnover in consultative, and we are short-staffed to a certain extent in our consultative bureau. But compliance is really, really where we struggle. We have a 20%, 15 or 20% vacancy rate in our compliance side. And that's because the consultative is what we call the fun side. That's where you can have I don't want to say a better relationship, but it's certainly a different relationship with our consultative staff than it is our compliance side. So I really, really had to focus on getting the pay raised for our compliance staff and trying to alleviate the turnover there. And if I can solve that, then my next move would try to be able to add resources and more employees to our consultative side, because that's really where injuries can be prevented and lives can be saved. But the challenge is balancing that between the deficiencies that we have in our compliance side and the resources that we have in consultative. But again, I'm well aware of that. And in a perfect world, I would want to raise pay and increase the number of staff that we have both on compliance and consultative. But from being an appropriations chair in the General Assembly, it all does come down to money. And there's a lot of different needs that we have. And labor is kind of, unfortunately, out of sight, out of mind a lot of times when you talk about education and healthcare, public safety, and all the other things that demands the legislators' attention. It's a real challenge to cut through, even for a former chair. To put it in perspective, roughly $20 million of the $26 billion state budget, $20 million is all that's appropriated. Now, our overall budget is around $40 million, but that's because half of it comes from receipts from our elevator and boiler inspectors. But $20 million out of the $26 billion budget comes from general appropriations. So we get lost in that sometimes, and it's really hard to cut through to try to get more funding, both for our consultative and our compliance side. But again, the question is spot on, and that's something I suspect that I'll have to continue working with throughout my tenure at Labor.
Yeah, and you really have some great people. I know there's a very few in that section, and we face the same things with state budgets all the time. And speaking of budget, I mean, when have we ever seen in North Carolina, what was that thing, 700 pages?
Yeah.
This budget bill? Really?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that before?
I haven't. It's insane. It's I guess with the COVID funds and all the other provisions and things that were in there, that's the way it come out. But at least I'm proud that we have a budget now, which I know a lot of the questions from local school boards and a lot of state government is happy that we have a budget. It is a bit much to have that many pages, but hopefully we can sort through it and move forward.
Very good. Kevin is answering the drone question for you there, Wade, in chat. And that's a very good answer. Thank you, Kevin, for taking that action for us. Okay, team. Look, last call on questions for chat. If anybody wants to raise their hand, please do so. We're going to be wrapping up here momentarily. Last call for questions for the commissioner. Okay, not seeing anything come in, Commissioner. On behalf of our local chapter and all the safety professionals in North Carolina, thank you so much for your time. You're the most genuine commissioner. I mean, it's amazing. You just have a great demeanor, and we just thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. And we look forward. We're going to invite you back if you don't mind, and we're going to talk.
Please.
Yeah, we're going to come back and put you on the schedule in 10, 11 months and come back through. And we look forward to the camaraderie and the relationship.
Well, I look forward to it as well. Honored to be with you guys, and hopefully see you soon in person.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your service, and we'll be in touch.